What if grief wasn't something to fix or suppress, but a doorway into healing, resilience, and deeper connection? Today's guest has dedicated her life to normalizing grief and helping people find hope through life's most difficult transitions. Hi, and welcome to the U World Order Showcase podcast, where we feature life, health, transformational coaches, and spiritual entrepreneurs stepping up to be the change they seek in the world. I'm your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist, on a mission to help coaches and entrepreneurs amplify their voice, monetize their mission, and get visible, leveraging Substack and podcasts. Today, we are speaking with Dina Bell LaRouche. And Dina is a PCC ICF-accredited coach with over 2,500 coaching hours and a certified thanatologist, specializing in leadership, grief, and change management. Through her work as a grief doula, author, speaker, and founder of Grief Unleashed and the Grieving Place, she helps individual coaches and organizations understand loss in a way that is compassionate, hopeful, and deeply human. Her Grief Companion program equips coaches and mental health professionals to support clients through transitions. And while her book, Grief Unleashed, and workshops continue to ripple comfort and wisdom across the globe. Her mission is simple yet profound: to alleviate suffering one tear at a time. Welcome to the show, Dina. It's great to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Jill. It's great to be with you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the big question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What's the most significant thing, in your opinion, as individuals we can do to make an impact on how the world is going?
Mm. Well, I think, one of the things that we have control over is ourselves. And I contend that so much of the pain that's in the world is because people have been conditioned to suppress, not express, their grief, their anger, the natural emotions that arise in us. So I believe that if there was a lot more compassion in the world, if there was patience afforded to people who are navigating life transition, and if we had policies and procedures and systems that were socially just, I think we would see a radical reimagining of what's happening in the world right now.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I'm going to bring this up because we were talking about it a little bit beforehand. You also have another business, sports law. And we were talking about how well the two go together, because sports, in some ways, it's not so great. And in other ways, it's just like so perfect in that in sports, we have young people who train, and there's the grief that comes from loss, or not achieving the things that are perceived to them as loss. Though I admire people that are willing to dedicate so much of their energy to perfecting a skill, and to be able to overcome that grief with the tools that you provide. But also, on the other hand, people who are grieving loss over other things in their lives, when they get involved in athletics, it tends to help them have a space that they can release stuff. So I love the yin and the yang of what you do. It's so beautiful.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I've been working in sport for about 34 years now, and I, along with my business partner, make it possible for about 20 plus humans now to do the kind of work that we do. So we offer consulting from legal to leadership to good governance, risk management. And as a leadership coach, long before I was doing and specializing in grief and loss, I was advocating for a more humanistic approach to the design and delivery of sport. And so I've served on 5 Olympic teams. So I've been at the highest level. And as a parent of now 3 adults, but when they were younger, my husband and I would be, volunteering on the field of play to support a really positive experience for these young minds and bodies. And as I was deepening my practice as a coach to go deeper in the realm of grief and loss, the field of play offered me a perfect living laboratory to explore people's attachment to an outcome. And that's what grief is. When our attachment is severed, the natural universal response is grief, is to grieve something. So we condition people at a very, very young age on how they ought to behave, what is their relationship with loss. And sadly, I can locate this in our North American culture. We tend to have an aversion to any form of emotional expression that we might deem as being excessive or not excessive enough. So it's very fascinating to kind of look at the world of sport and understand our relationship with grief. You wouldn't normally hear people in the context of sport talking about grief. They wouldn't say it that way, right?
No, they don't, but we really should because it's all about grief. One side is going to experience grief. They're not going to get the outcome that they wanted.
Yeah.
And we need to work and be better at helping people, as you said, accept whatever outcome comes and not be like it it, it shouldn't be so personal.
Right.
I guess is yes, I know there are people that get paid to perform and their performance and this works in, not just in sports, but across the board in terms of like generating an income in life and having to be really your best at everything. And every day you have to bring your very best. And that's just not, as humans, we're not capable of that. There are going
Mm-hmm.
to be up days and down days.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way that nature works.
Well, I think it's interesting that, we're landing on the world of sport. My high hope would be as more and more athletes are reclaiming their agency and they're speaking about mental health. Mental health includes being able to express our grief after loss, right? It's to be able to talk about the cost or the toll it takes to perform on demand. And my sense is that, as we start to normalize this and we have people that we look up to as grief advocates for a healthier expression of grief, we're going to be able to then condition the younger people and maybe some of the older ones too to say, oh, I'm not being weak. In fact, if I'm expressing my emotion and crying, that might actually be the more natural way for me to process this loss.
Yeah. Animals shake. Humans don't. I mean, if you walked up to somebody and they were just standing there shaking, you might have thought they lost their mind. But we have natural responses to situations, and when we start trying to make them something that they're not or trying to suppress them, it has profound effects on our bodies.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Most of the time people think that grief is only an emotion when in fact it's a omni experience, right? There's the bio, psycho, social, spiritual, right, moral kind of review of our entire life, depending on the attachment we have to the person, or in many cases, grief accompanies non-finite losses. So think of when your children leave home. There's a lot of grief at the reordering of the family unit as you knew it for, decades, right? There's grief related to the ending of relationships in divorce, for instance. There's pet loss. There's the loss associated when we move from our family home. So there's all kinds of losses, both the finite losses, death related, and then there's the non-finite losses. And it's really helpful for people to understand that over our lifespan, we accumulate all of these losses. And if they don't know that what they've experienced is grief worthy, where does that
Right.
pain go? Right?
And says a lot about our society that we have to be told that it's pain worthy. If you're feeling pain, that's grief. It's okay, it's natural. And we
Yeah.
need to be able to express it and we need to learn how to receive information about people in pain or in grief. I know you're a grief doula. What does that look like and how does that help facilitate these kinds of conversations?
Well, it's so interesting. You're a coach, I'm a coach. In the early days of me doing this, I'm taking you back almost a decade now. I was using the word grief coach. And if you look at the ICF on the drop down menu, there isn't the word
Mhm.
grief and coach combined. So I think I was on to something, if you will. They talk about life coaching, but that's a panacea of different, life experiences, if you will. I am a subject matter expert in the field in the domain of grief and coaching. And the word coach, though, and a lot of us as coaches are starting to reimagine, even that container feels too small to talk about the nature of the work that we're doing. So I kind of traverse the coaching. So I will ask people, do you have a goal that you are hoping to either accomplish or experience with me in this work? And I would find that certain types really respond to that, but other types need a softer approach. So the word doula came to me because doula means to be a servant to. And we have birth doulas, we have death doulas. And my specialty, my passion is really working with people in their grief experience. It could be supporting people who are dying and the grief that is a natural part of their experience as they see the end coming near. It's also supporting their family and friends in that process, and then the postlude, right? Like what happens after your person dies. And I'm going to stress this, because grief is a natural human, normal, healthy expression of our attachment that's lost, it doesn't find itself into often therapy, and other mental health providers are not trained often in grief modalities because it isn't a pathology, except for a very small portion of the humans on the planet that might have additional complications in their grief. So there is a diagnosis in the DSM called prolonged grief disorder. And those of us who are certified thanatologists and a growing group of people kind of bristle at describing grief as being disordered, much like we wouldn't describe complications in childbirth as being disordered. We would say there's complications, but we wouldn't necessarily pathologize it. So I think there's some tension now with the addition of grief in the DSM. It affords people the legitimacy to go to therapy. But if your therapist isn't trained in grief and loss because it hasn't been pathologized, they're like, ooh, I'm not sure. I'm going to go back and let's go revisit your childhood, which is what most therapy does, is it wants to understand your foundation, right? Your meaning making, your attachments, how many losses you've gone through, if you've gone through adverse childhood experiences. As coaches, we know our focus typically is in the now and in the future. But when you go to a therapist, they're taking the pain that you're bringing, which is now pain, and having you go back so they can map, your system. And so it's so often when people come to me, Jill, they're coming and feeling so relieved. I often get an hour with you feels like 10 years of therapy, because I'm helping them deal with the pain in the present, which is located in their heart, their head, their bodies, right? And giving them like practices, witnessing their experience. Often after a few sessions, I mean, I've had clients who have had 6 to 10 sessions, they're feeling so much better. And then they come back 2 or 3 years later, feeling like off kilter. And they often feel like they're going insane because they're like, I felt so much better. And my response to them is, you will continue to grieve for the rest of your life. For instance, if your partner dies, your children are grieving the loss of their parent, right? Well, when they get married, do you not think they're going to have a sudden temporary upsurge in grief or a stug? Because now their parent isn't going to walk them down their aisle or be present to them. So if we can understand and normalize the fact that this pain that you're feeling is something that you will learn to carry for the rest of your life, then you lose this need to have an outcome and to have it be done on time. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. I've witnessed people losing parents, and there's like this expectation of Are you crying? Are you crying too much? Are you not crying at all? Are you mad? Are you irrationally happy about something? I
Right.
mean, it's like there's supposed to be rules for grieving, but there aren't any rules. Everybody goes through these experiences individually, just like birth. And I love that you're a doula because I was a goat doula
Oh, I love that.
for a lot of years. I actually was trained to be a people doula, but I ended up helping goats give birth. But it just
Oh,
means to come alongside of, and we live in a culture that doesn't
exactly.
have friends in the way that maybe friends used to develop over years in other societies
Mm,
in the countries that we live in. We, as a society, we dealt with each other differently. We're so transient now and have been for the last 40 years that it's hard for those kinds of relationships to grow. And then you don't have somebody that can just be present for you. And a
yeah.
lot of times when people are grieving, they just need somebody to be present.
Oh, absolutely. The word I use is witnessing.
Mhm,
Can I witness you? Can I create a brave space where you feel seen, heard, met, acknowledged,
mhm.
witnessed? And we know from the grief literature that the reason why it works to be witnessed, not to solve my problem of grief, because it is this natural, human experience. But when
It's
you
not a
witness
problem.
me, exactly, it's not a problem. When you're witnessing me, I am seeing you and I'm feeling mirrored in my experience. That is the cathartic moment. So I can cry on my own, and the crying is helpful, but it's partial. When someone else that I trust can actually create that safe space where I can show up and cry or rant or rage, right? That is the sweet nectar. So part of what I do is I teach people how to tap into their compassionate muscles. If you're a coach, it's helping you understand your own life losses, because we cannot accompany someone where we ourselves dare not travel. So therapists know this, right? And coaches, who are interested in this work, who are being drawn to this idea that they can actually companion someone through their grief experience, the first thing I do is take them through their own loss map, have an inventory of all the accumulations of your losses, and have clarity on all that you've packed into your invisible grief backpack. And there's so much more compassion available to us when we start to make this inventory of my parents. Maybe there's a death of a parent, for sure, grandparents when they're younger, right? There could likely a divorce, 50% of the population doesn't stay together. Sibling loss, right? Parents who've moved a lot, so there was this unstable environment, pet loss. So kids go through a lot of these life losses, and we tend to diminish them. They're invisible for most of us, but they do impact how we relate to future losses. It's a predictor, actually, right? So
Mhm.
it's helpful for us to have some of this, grief language that normalizes our experience and humanizes it, right?
Yeah. Nobody gets through childhood without being traumatized. If
Right?
this is just like it just doesn't happen. And I think what I love about coaches is that they focus on helping you deal with the now to get to become able to function. Because at some point we can get so crippled by all of the trauma and the grief that trauma generates grief. No matter big trauma, little trauma, there's a grief component attached to it that a lot of us don't understand how to process together. And and when you're talking about that, it's like if you don't take care of that for yourself, you can't help others. And if you're a therapist and you're just like, here, let's rummage around in all this stuff. I, I honestly think a lot of times therapists make things worse for people
Mm.
than actually helping them cope with where they are at, where there's in so much pain that they can't really function, because that's usually when people end up going to a therapist,
Yeah,
hoping
you're
for
so right.
relief.
I would say that, therapists have supervision. They learn the art of reflective practice,
Mhm.
um, and they understand that they're human. So, is the therapist healing themselves by doing the necessary work, ensuring that they have these really healthy boundaries in place so that they're not, at risk of transferring, right? Or countertransference is what we say in the therapeutic world. So our shadows that we have inside of us are not coming up in therapy if I'm the person who's supposed to be creating that safe space, right? I would also say Henry Newman's work is really beautiful because he talks about wounded healers. And I love that term, Jill, because it speaks to my why. As someone who carried a life loss, my younger sister died tragically 24 and a half years ago. We were both young moms. And that death experience really changed everything for me. There was the before Tracy had cancer and the after. There was the before she died and after she died. And that has inspired my work in this space. So I would say those of us who come to the profession of wanting to be doulas or companions or coaches or healers, we often are inspired by a life experience that changed us, that cracked us right open. And so I do believe that what I always ask people, what's your intention? What is bringing you to me? And I do explain my scope of practice. I love that you said all trauma carries grief, but not all grief is traumatic. So I can work with someone at two levels: someone who is not traumatized by their grief, but still feeling stuck and lethargic and who am I now? And doing some of that deeper work. I also, because of my training, feel very comfortable accompanying people who've been traumatized by the death experience or by the grief experience. But I would say most coaches or therapists, for instance, who aren't trained in that, it's good to know who to refer to, right? There's lots of trauma informed and grief informed mental health providers. And there's a growing community of grief coaches who feel comfortable, traversing the therapy landscape, the grief landscape into this realm that is now growing. It's not just the domain of therapy, and therapy is looking at coaching and saying, oh, we're going to borrow some of the practices from coaching because it's actually healthy. So it's more of a mixed bag now, I'm seeing. I think both domains are looking at each other and saying, hey, we should be able to link arms to support the person. We don't have to compete with each other, right? But ontologically, I think it's important for us to know what our personal why is and what drives us as care providers, and then to be really clear about what is my training, what's my competence, and do I feel skillful in dealing with this human who's in front of me, who's in pain, because that's typically what is bringing them to therapy. For us as coaches, it's not always that. It's this, I'm yearning to go over there and I'm feeling stuck here. Can you help me? Right?
Yeah. It is a beautiful thing in my worldview that there's kind of a blending of healers across the board, even in the health realm, like the physical health realm, with naturopaths and regular MDs, and you can see the blending. There's still, staunch people that are just like it's one or the other, but
Right.
more and more we're starting to see there's a blending of practices, which I think is beneficial for everyone. You know, everyone is going to experience times when they need a doctor or where they need a therapist or they need somebody to just help them move beyond where they're at because they just don't see the other options open to them. And
Mhm.
it's not because of some defect on their part. It's just that sometimes we have done as much as we can and we just can't see that next step. And I think that coaches and therapists and doulas and people that come alongside of you can help you explore and expand your options, which is often what people need. Can,
Exactly.
can I ask you a question? And this is going to show my ignorance, but what is thanatology? I have actually never heard that term before.
It is not showing your ignorance. It is a very frequent question. I didn't know what thanatology was until I started to immerse myself in the wild, wonderful world that is grief and loss. So, Thanos is the god of death, and ology is the study of. So, when you put it
Ah,
together, it's really the study of death and loss. And I would offer life and living, because when you awaken to the impermanence, right, of our being, you know that you start living much more purposefully. And this is why people like Viktor Frankl, that I cite in my book, and other giants, in the field of psychology, but also ancient wisdom, in our more modern expression as North American culture, influenced by European, culture and policy, we have this tendency of wanting to be linear and wanting to solve problems and wanting to be productive. But when we start thinking about the conditions of the human heart and things like, oh, this is impermanent. We are not going to be here forever. I'm going to die. You're going to die. My children are going to die. My children's children are going to die. So, what is my relationship with loss? And if I don't meditate or practice or start to be more mindful of that, no wonder, when loss rips off the veils of the heart, right? We start wondering, like, who am I now? And how do I function in a world that wants to have me deny my experience, that wants me to go back and be a good girl and produce and consume? This is the quandary we're in. So when we look at other cultures, I'm thinking of Mexicans and the Day of the Dead, their relationship with grief and loss is vastly different than, I would say, what we as North Americans have been conditioned to adopt as our dominant mindset. So the field of thanatology invites us to explore everything from as ancient to Aristotle, first know thyself, to more current contemporary grief and bereavement strategies that helps us understand that we don't have to deny and move on from our loss. We can learn to grow alongside it, incorporate that story through continuing bonds, right? Which is such a beautiful theory, and allow our life to be enriched, not in spite of the loss, but because of it. And that requires a community. So what I'm seeing now is a general like lens of isolation. And that to me is like during the pandemic, when people were having to say goodbye to their person online on Zoom, people weren't allowed to go to the funeral, which is a ritual that is full of meaning, right? Because we have community linking arms with us when we are at our most vulnerable, which is in the acute days after someone dies. So unless we start to ask ourselves, are these policies, do they make sense? Think about the bereavement policy. Most of them in Canada, we've been fighting against this, but 3 to 5 days, right? You get 5 days for a child and 3 for a sibling. Who made that up? It doesn't make any sense to think that 3 to 5 days. Why did we make it up? We made it up because we want people to go back to producing and consuming. But life doesn't work like that. Attachment doesn't work like that. Our hearts don't work like that. So the real risk, especially when I'm dealing with executives, is you say you have these values of equanimity and compassion and respect. Well, how are you using those values when people are at their most vulnerable, which is when they are bereaved? You want to see loyalty? Start treating your people really well and ensure that your bereavement policies are matching your values. That will breed a level of loyalty that you cannot buy. That's why this field is so important.
It really is. People don't realize how expensive it is to lose employees. And if you've got somebody who's grieving, they're not productive. They may show up, but their brain is just like not there.
Exactly.
You have so much emotion you just have to process, and best done in a safe environment, not having to make decisions when your whole soul, and it really is a soul level
Yeah.
experience when you lose somebody. um you just, it's worse than being really sick. Your brain just isn't able to process stuff.
Yeah. There's actually a great book for your listeners called The Grieving Brain by Mary Frances O'Connor. And she talks about what happens to our brain. Like we have to rewire a lot of these routines. You know, I've been with my high school sweetheart now. We're married and have 3 children, like 38 years. When he dies, it's going to be a whole, or I die before him, it's going to be a whole reordering of everything
Mhm.
because we've learned how to be with each other for 38 years on the planet, right? So the understanding the neurobiology of grief and loss and the implications of bringing someone too soon. So what typically happens? They get a doctor's note and they're off for 3 months and they're feeling even more isolated and rejected. But if we flip the script and we created caring cultures that equipped people with the language to say, you know, Jill, I just want you to know I'm really sad on your behalf. Went to the funeral and I just want you to know that I'm here for you. So I'd like to know, is there anything I can do for you today to help you in this moment? Right? Like give people the language. Understand. I use The Love Languages by Dr. Carrie Chapman as an example of understanding people's behavioral preferences, their love language. And it's a really fun to help people understand like what would be most helpful to the person who's grieving. So you can do that love language, you know, little map and get people to feel a little bit more comfortable saying to people, here's what I need from you. You bring me flowers, that doesn't do anything. It's my basement love language. But if you mow my lawn, you are gold to me. So it's just kind of helpful because we don't have this language. And black now, when we were black, well, it doesn't mean anything, right? It used to mean that this person is
Very
bereft.
mourning.
But we don't have these little hacks, if you will, that communicates to people that I'm sad. Instead, we turn to social media and we know that that tends to exasperate the problem, not help it. So I feel like really strongly that as coaches, especially if we incorporate this loss literacy into our practice, it's like another lens. And once you have this lens, Jill, it opens up your heart. And I feel we are so much more skillful in helping our clients navigate change, which is what we do. But we also know that our clients come to us and then they're in the arc of the change and then they roll back in. Why? Because they are attached to their beliefs, their practices, their rituals, their habits. And if we can teach them and do a ritual around that, help them unattach from some of those limiting thoughts and beliefs, that's the world of coaching. I believe that coaches can then like expand their capacity if they learn the language of grief because they can work with clients in a much more agile way and express like deep compassion for how difficult it is to move from this way of being to what you're longing to do. And I can tell you, as someone who's worked with athletes, it works because the athletes are so used to like the command and control and you just have to do it head down. But when I work with them, we are a lot more intentional, a lot softer, and we bring in grief practices to help them unattach from their teammates, from their routines, from being known as, Team Canada. And in that process, their ability to mourn the who they were before, they stopped competing becomes more available to them, right? Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. It's probably why you see like professional athletes, they stop competing. They either want to hang on to it long beyond when they should for their own health's sake, or they feel like they're lost.
Yeah.
You can see it in famous people. It happens quite often. And
Actually, Michael Phelps, who is one of your like
mhm,
shining stars, right?
mhm,
The most winning, human on the planet with I don't know how many medals he received as a swimmer. He
mhm.
talks about that very thing about being lost after he retired from the pool. And we have to
Yep.
understand like these little people from the moment they were really small, they were vocationally devoting their life to the singular pursuit of making the Olympic team or the Paralympic team. So no wonder it hurts,
It's
right?
it's there. It's like becoming divorced. When you divorce a spouse, there's stuff that leads up to it that causes the friction, but it is a small death because now you have to rewire your brain. You're used to certain patterns. These people, they spend their whole life, I mean, from the moment they wake up in the morning to whatever they eat, whatever their recreational things are, which is very limited
Yeah.
for athletes that perform on that level. It's just like their whole life, their whole being is devoted to this one singular practice. They're like priests, to the exclusion of like taking care of themselves. They have a team that
Yeah.
that takes care of them so that they can just be this machine at what they're doing. And
Mm,
and then when they stop, it's like who am I?
exactly.
How do I live? Because they don't know how. They
Exactly. And what you just said, that is true of anything. Like when we retire, I deal with people who retire and they're like, who am I now? I thought this was going to be a lot more fun, but I'm struggling because of the routine and the people and the paycheck and the roles and responsibilities, right? That came with this title. And so what you're pointing to, which is really beautiful, it's like, how do I navigate life in transition?
get
That's the question, right? So, how do you navigate life in transition?
you hire Dina.
Well,
At the very least,
that's a
you
beautiful
read her
segue.
book.
Yeah, it's right here. I'm
So
very
tell us a
proud
little
of it.
bit about your book and also about
Oh, the petals and
petals and
pebbles practice.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
So when people join my Substack, and there's like most of my Substack is free. The only time it's there's a little cost for the year membership. It's really for grief professionals who want to like hone their coping practices, etc. So when people join, I've curated this little practice that was so helpful to me. Still a student at university taking courses in thanatology. There was this beautiful practice called petals and pebbles. So it invites us to be looking at all these things in our lifespan. So from zero to where I am now, and being able to name all these things that I would consider a petal. So these milestone moments, right? So for me, getting married, having my babies, right? Graduating from university a couple of times, like all of these things. But then there's also the hardships. What are the pebbles? And the pebbles, some of them were really small, like not getting picked for something. But some of them were big, like the death of my dad and the death of my sister, and smaller, the death of my grandparents, but still present. So when we lay this out and I have an example of it, it's like, oh, life is both. It's not just losses, it's the petals and the pebbles, and they each kind of enrich each other, right? So that's a really helpful healing practice. Um, and my book, I wrote this really as a love story between two sisters, my own experience of learning and discovering. I'm a journalist by trade. That was what I learned in university, and wanting to help people understand what happens to us when we are bereaved, because the literature just really wasn't out there in an accessible way, right? I was having this experience where I was being rewarded for being stoic and strong and helping to raise money to keep Tracy's memory alive. And that was beautiful. But on parallel tracks, the conditioning of just doing grief a la stoic and quiet and, not too much, that too I found very complicating. So the book, raises money for bereavement charities that are near and dear to my heart. And I hope it does bring a form of cathartic experience and a sense of like, relief is usually what people feel, Jill, when they have a conversation with me.
So do you coach one-on-one or do you have a course or how does all of that look?
It's multiple. So I offer on my website, I talk about the different ways that I support people. So one on one for sure. I also do families, and there's some levels of complication because if one person dies in a family system, that family system is no longer the family system. So people have to reorient. And because our coping styles are different, right? Some people need to talk, some people need to run, some people need to bake, some people need to punch, right? A boxing match, like everybody's coping style is different. So I work with families. I also do a lot of training. So I have, different training programs. More and more, I'm really on fire when it comes to being with other coaches like you and I that's just my tribe. So I have a few offerings that's more specific for coaches. My favorite one is the Grief Companion Program, where I take a group of coaches. It's a smaller group, no more than 12, and we take deep dive over a 5.5 month period where we just explore the Grief Companion model that I've developed. And then I do other things like life review. If someone's dying and they need the service of a grief doula, I help them review their life story and then help them write it. So it's a keepsake for, the people that they love. I'm also connected in the US. There's something called Help Text. And so I'm one of their champions. And I would love for people to have immediate access, right? And we know that it costs money and someone's time to be able to support people far outweigh the need that is there. So help text is a really cool modality that allows people to sign up. It's very inexpensive. I think it's like $80 a year. And you can let the text bot know what kind of death or loss you're struggling with. And you start to receive texts on the loss. And I tested it, of course, because I wanted to know if it was really helpful. And I found it, even though it was a few years after my dad's death, I found it really helpful to receive a text that felt very personalized, customized to my unique experience and had me reflect a little bit more about the hole that was still in my heart. And also, what I most appreciate about my dad, that's the gift of grief, right? There's grief on one side and there's love on the other side of this coin, right?
Some memories. I had Simbi, my husband's dad passed a couple years ago, and we had hospice who came to our house and but they still 2 years later are sending us periodically. We just get a little note from them saying,
Oh,
we were thinking about you. We remember your dad.
yeah,
It's hugely helpful to have support like that. And
right?
I think those text messages have got to be really helpful for somebody that's going through it, even
Mhm.
further out into the experience. Because
Yeah,
we want people to just, get your grieving done and be done. You got a week and you should be back and functioning. We were talking about the clothing. People used to dress in black. It was for a full year. You wore your
exactly.
grieving clothes for a full year, and people knew it was a signal to society that this person is in grief. Be nice. They're going
Right.
through a thing. And we don't do that anymore. So, just in your mind when you're talking to people, they're going through a thing. Be
Yeah.
nice.
Right. That could be a hashtag.
Yeah. Exactly. I really appreciate you coming and joining us today, Dina.
I
Um,
really enjoyed connecting with you, Jill. Thank you.
People can find you on your website. You want to give them both your Substack and your regular website?
Sure. So for people who are not aware of Substack, basically it's people are migrating towards theirs so that they can share their newsletter. So it's my newsletter, and you can find me just by going to griefunleashed.ca. And if you want to sign up to my newsletter, you just click and it'll bring you to Substack. As I said, there's there's a free option, and that shares all kinds of information and knowledge. Sometimes people want to have a free consultation. So I offer a booking, and people can reach out to me, and you can find that also at griefunleashed.ca. I take all, calls. If people are courageous enough to reach out, I will have a little session with them. It's 20 minutes, I think, is what I offer, and to see whether or not this is a good fit, or if I think that maybe something else might be more suitable for them. So those are some of the ways that people can reach out to me.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
To learn more about Dina and to get her book and explore more about Petals and Pebbles, the practice, please consider subscribing to her Substack, which you can find at The Grieving Place, on Substack, or her website, griefunleashed.ca. And we'll be sure to put those links in the show notes below. Thank you for tuning in with us today. If you have a podcast or you're interested in starting one, be sure to reach out to us at support@heartlifecoach.com. We love helping spiritual entrepreneurs and coaches amplify their voice and monetize their mission, and offer a variety of ways to do this leveraging Substack. Join us for our next episode as we share what others are doing to raise the global frequency. And remember, change begins with you. You have all the power to change the world. Start today and get visible.